If you're not careful, and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpets, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you. May 12th, 2019, a post appeared on 4chan's paranormal board, and since then, the internet's never been the same. I would, in fact. Thanks, son. Hello, my blood blokes and laid-back lasses, and welcome back to the channel. Or if you're new, subscribe before I replace one of your walls in your house with one that defies the laws of light. 6 years later, and there's a crap ton of games, analog horror series, and in general the concept of the Backrooms has been completely altered from its original iteration. Some people like how it's evolved, others wish that the wider Backrooms kept to the liminal feel. Now, I see both sides of this because I also think liminal horror is heavily talked about, but it's actually like criminally underused. On the other hand, the change to the more SCP style of Backrooms was almost eternally destined to eventually happen. But what if it wasn't, though? Today, I ask the question, would the Backrooms work without monsters?
What is liminal horror?
Before we do anything though, I should lay down a solid definition of what liminal horror is, because liminality is a very hard thing to track down a solid definition for. The main problem is mainly because of the fact that it's more of a feeling than a concept. Therefore, it's hard to find one common definition. But the best I can do is, liminal horror is a type of locational horror in a piece of media, photo, game, video, whatever, that uses transitional locations that give off an unsettling familiarity, even when it's a place the viewer has never seen before. In addendum, liminality can be accentuated by a lack of people in a place typically filled with people, commonly referred to as a place between places. To know what it would look like though, let's expand on what makes liminal horror so tricky, and why the Backroom struggles with it.
The Backrooms and the expansion of liminal horror.
When I first thought of this video, I believed liminal horror broke under any kind of context. The more rules you add, the more the lore, entities, mechanics, the less weird and wrong the world feels. Oh no, it's Chucky aka entity 69691273. Luckily I found a blue crayon. He loves blue crayons but hates purple ones. So the worst he'll do is open a wormhole to level -2 and not shove a firecracker up my ass. Luckily I found a blue crayon. He loves blue crayons but hates the purple ones. So the worst thing he'll do is open a wormhole to level -2 and not shove a firecracker up my ass. The reason I use past tense is because after doing some research, I was completely wrong. And the two pieces of media that especially expose that to me are the analog horror series, the Thompson extension, and the absolutely batshit insane book, House of Leaves. Both of these series actually have a pretty similar story, that being an endless labyrinth mysteriously appeared in a regular house, and when it's explored it causes a toll on the mind. But let's get to the specifics of each series, starting with the Thompson extension. The Thompson extension is the more obvious use of liminal horror between the two examples because it's a visual medium, and it's also an analog horror. The use of AI, while controversial, is the perfect way to create a liminal feeling because the whole point of it is that it's something that feels familiar, but you haven't seen it before. And AI does that exactly to make images. It takes thousands of real images that may have a sense of familiarity and smushes them together into an amalgamation that you've never seen before. In the sense of adding story and context to these somewhat scary pictures, the Thompson extension does it in a very smart way. Rather than just dropping in Earl the evil killer man, they instead have the main threat be the mental decline people have when they go through the random, rare mental diseases. To be honest, when I think about it now, the Thompson extension is just Urban Spook's analog horror series, but like, good? Someone goes to the Thomas extension, they get a mental disease, they devolve into some like a disgusting amalgamation of skin and flesh, and it ends the episode there. Anyways, a reason that liminality is still allowed to exist with an opposing force is the cosmic force of it, which is the extension itself, instead of Earl. Also, there aren't really any known rules to the extension. Basically anything can happen, including literally nothing. But what I mean by that is, one lady opens up a curtain expecting a new room and she literally sees the void. She died, by the way. House of Leaves. House of Leaves is dealt a difficult hand when it comes to liminality because the author has the problem: how do you make text evoke the weird deja vu feeling that liminal horror has in visual media? Along with that, there are many things that normally would be towing the line of too much information given. Danowski gets around this problem masterfully through many levels of it being a retelling and untrusty storytellers and stuff like that. In House of Leaves, there are 3 levels of retelling. The first level is the Navidson record, which is a movie that, according to Johnny, does not exist. The second layer is Zampano's review of the Navidson record, where he acts like it's real, and it makes many references and quotes to real people that just don't exist. And the last level is Johnny reassembling Zampano's review and going absolutely fucking mental himself. Like, he's characterized as like a master liar and storyteller, and I'm personally a master myself, a masturbator. I'm gonna cut that. All these narrators' faults make everyone untrustworthy. In fact, everyone is so untrustworthy, we don't even know if Navidson or Zampano ever existed. This puts a layer over all the information we gain about the labyrinth. Every detail you read, every fact, may be fake. The more you know, the less you know. Talking about the information, let's go everything we get told. The Davidsons come home after a trip where they notice a mysterious new closet in their house. Mr. Davison does some measuring on the inside of the closet for some reason, and learns that the dimensions don't make logical sense to fill the house. He's a photographer, not a handyman, so he asks his brother, who's a carpenter, to come measure it, and he seconds his measurement. Some more measuring hijinks ensue, and eventually Davidson goes to the closet for it to be a mile-long dark hallway. He goes to explore, and he says that it goes on way past any realistic physics would allow. He then hears a growl sound and leaves. While leaving though, he notices the layout is different. Some more explanations are done with other people, and they learn that anything left inside the labyrinth gets ripped up or disappears. This gives the reader the implication that there's an actual monster in the labyrinth. That's key. The implication of a monster is more horrifying than the actual reveal. The Backrooms forgot this. House of Leaves lives in it. This idea is made even more specific with all the crossed out references of the Minotaur. We can't actually trust any of this though, because we never actually see the monster, which leaves us in suspense of what will happen. Also, anyone who enters the house gets affected mentally to some extent, similar to the Thomas extension, just nowhere near as extreme. All of this context and backstory for these labyrinths don't destroy the liminality of the story, but actually enhances them tenfold. This shows that lore being added to the Backrooms won't ruin it, as long as it's well thought out.
The role of isolation in liminal horror.
One thing you'll notice from all these different liminal horror pictures is that there's no people. Hell, there aren't any animals and usually no real plant life either. Liminal pictures have a kind of lifeless feel to them that can only exist when the viewer is alone. And one of the greatest showings of this actually isn't horror at all. It is... Yeah, I know you're writing in the comments now, "Oh, Ghostie, everyone uses Half-Life as an example, be more original." And I'd say, screw you! And while you're down there, like and subscribe. The reason everyone uses it as an example is because it's just the perfect example of liminality, in non-horror things at least. First off, it has a basis that is like fucking gorilla glued crack to any non-picture liminal project in it, that it uses transitional spaces for the liminality. Now, I didn't actually tell you what transitional spaces are in the definition section, which is my fault, but I'll do that now. Transitional spaces are the spaces between two static places, the areas where the start and end of your journey are. Basically, if I had to make it one word, it would be the trip, which is why hallways are so popular as liminal spaces. They are the perfect example of a transitional space. They're the area between your starting place, like a lobby, and your destination, like a hotel room, where, you know, there's a dead hooker. One of the most popular examples used for Half-Life is the playground. This is a very small area, and really, a nothing burger if you aren't paying attention. But before I be all pretentious about the deep meaning of this place, let's get some context. Right before the playground, we are in City 17, a city controlled by the Combine, which are authoritarian bad guys, and we see how strict they are on the residents of this poor city. Then, we head down an alley and see an empty park with a destroyed doll and garbage everywhere. We also hear the faint sound of kids playing and laughing that's silenced by the wind. The obvious implication here is that in City 17 is so strict, not even the children are allowed to have fun outside. Or the Combine came with Xboxes and PlayStations and all the kids are inside spamming slurs in a COD lobby. You fucking homosexual, I'm gonna hang you! Really either are likely, to be honest. After this section, there are more shows of how authoritarian the Combine are and how rough the people of City 17 have it. Then we escape and do some cool crowbar shit. Although Half-Life is a relatively grounded setting compared to the Backrooms, so let's do a more cosmic horror with, once again, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I'm gonna use House of Leaves as an example at least one more time. I'm sorry, it's the best book ever and is a great resource for this video. Blame it on Mark Z. Danowski, the author. Anyways, to the point. While there are many examples of adventures into the labyrinth, there are only a couple of lone trips. Most of them are Davidson by himself though, so let's focus on our main man. To be honest, this example doesn't really fully hit on the definition because the labyrinth doesn't have the disparity of being a place normally filled with people, without people. It's just an endless paradox that absorbs people into the house. It does fill the other parts of the definition though. The entirety of the labyrinth is a transitional space. The start is the Davidson house, but the destination isn't like one defined place, it's more of like the concept of the end that they're looking for. The explorers are trying to make sense of the senseless and get to the end of the labyrinth, but obviously, there's no end. Anyways, to the isolation part. Depending on the people in the labyrinth, things change, and it's not just a sense of it being easier to continue on with people helping. I mean that the layout of the labyrinth literally changes depending on the people that are inside of it. The walls shift and areas will either get larger and smaller. Those effects are multiplied to the extreme when it's just one guy. Jesus Christ. Left, can you please take her back home? I have to finish this video before the portal destabilizes. In Davidson's first exploration, we don't actually have a basis of what a normal labyrinth is, so it's just a setup of the basic skills of the labyrinth as a basis. The last exploration is the more interesting one though. At this point, Davidson thinks he has a grasp of what the house can do and starts exploring alone. He gets surprised that the house makes everything a slope while he rides the bike, and the house almost seems to taunt him with the constant shifting of the roof and walls to the point where the roof is touching his head, and other times it's completely out of view. The point where isolation becomes the focal point is when he falls into the void. Well, I guess you can't really describe it as falling. You can't tell if he's falling, floating, or even moving at all. The only thing accompanying him at this point are flares, matches, and a mysterious book he brought for some reason, even after crashing his bike. The book is described as 700 pages long, hard to read due to a weird placement of words on pages, and having some pages with many words and others with only a couple. This book is House of Leaves, the same book we've been reading. Now, I'm not going to spend the rest of the video talking about how many layers of fucking bullshit that is, because truthfully, this book needs its own separate long video essay review on it, and eventually I'll get to that. Will be a couple months or a couple years, I don't know. To be honest, I have no clue. But you should subscribe and maybe even support my Patreon, because it will eventually be made. Back on track. He only has one thing to go. reading the book. He's running out of light though, so he starts burning red pages so that he can finish. Really, the whole point of this part of the story is to emphasize his isolation in the labyrinth, so that Karen saving him is this massive moment of each of them thinking and caring about each other so much that the house literally cannot separate them anymore. When I think about it, this last exploration is just a very abstract version of emphasizing each part of liminality as a whole.
Psychological versus physical horror in liminal spaces.
We have now reached the section of the video that I've least excited to talk about. The kinds of threats in liminal focused stories and media. The reason I'm so unexcited to talk about this topic is because my opinion on it's kind of contradictory. And I gotta do this long blah 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 about why it isn't a completely retarded take and it should still be taken seriously. Before we get to the examples of different forms of liminal horror done well though, let's just talk about the 3 real options you only have for threats in a liminal story. The first and least risky, but kind of boring to be honest, is the psychological threat. You know the whole song and dance of, "Oh, it was all in your head, Ellis, you a crazy son of a bitch, man." The only reason it's not so risky is that unless Ellis has schizophrenia, you don't have a threat like subverting the vibe of liminality that is seen to the viewer. So its strength is also its weakness, which is, never good. The second is the cosmic level threat of whatever location the characters are at being the threat itself. I don't mean that in the sense of there being Indiana Jones style boulders placed behind every corner, but in the sense that the place is basically alive and is just kind of fucking around with the people inside of it. It's probably the most reliable and common threat in this kind of story with all my examples. The Thomas extension, The Shining, House of Leaves, they all use this form of threat as part of the total threat level at least. They do execute it completely differently though, so I'll explain that in a bit. After I explain, the third and last kind of threat is by far the riskiest when it comes to keeping a liminal feel in a form of media, and that is the physical threat. The physical threat can take the form of either a person who's gone fucking insane or an actual cryptid type motherfucker. Oh, come on. Just take the loss. I took your place fair and square. What? You used to be so talkative. Oh, don't act like you wouldn't make the choice. We'll see. Anyways, before my promise fully leaves your skull, let's rip it out and talk about it now. How do these 2 stories execute the same idea in completely different ways? Well, House of Leaves has a very active opposing force with the Labyrinth, where the layout of the place is constantly shifting and the place actively destroys/deletes things that are brought into it. You can't have shit in the Labyrinth. On the other hand though, the Thomas extension has a more laid-back abyss where it's just kind of hands out rare and specific mental illnesses like candy on Halloween. Now let's go through the different examples that emphasize each type of these threat, starting with the psychological priority with the Thomas extension. The Thomas extension uses 2 of the 3 kinds of threats with a focus on the mental and a little bit on the cosmic. Basically, the cosmic threat is just an extension that's used to setting the basis of the spreading of the mental issues, and the rest of the story is just talking about the mental issues and what's caused by them. House of Leaves. House of Leaves is one of the few pieces of media who actually hits all 3 and has them all be good parts of the story. It has the mental through the aspects that are shown through the characters and how they change from exposure to Labyrinth. In fact, the author wants you to take focus on that so much, he actually added a part of Zampano's review section where it's just like, yeah, here's a list and ranking of the mental effects of the people who've been around the Labyrinth. Maybe think about it too, you bastard. Also, the entire storyline of Johnny is basically exclusively him going fucking crazy with some quote-unquote monster interactions. It actually has cosmic horror as its focus for most of the threats in the Labyrinth. Which is obviously because it's more active and aggressive in nature against everyone, including people who research it. I could actually go on to a multi-hour diatribe about all the different theories about how the house is actually the book, but I don't hate myself in my currently good watch time enough to do that. Anyhow, The physical threat is a lot less physical than normal because the concept of the physical threat is used as more of a fake out to make you start thinking of other horror stories where it's like, Charlie reads the Bingle Bad Bingle book and starts to see him in the distance, but every time he looks at it, it's a little closer. Eventually he gets super duper killed with realistic bloody eyes and never seen again. And then it's actually just like a physical representation of Johnny's mother and the labyrinth destroying things. It is a very like monster ripped it up fashion, like an absolute fucking troll. So I lied about it being all three technically because the physical threat is mental, but fuck you, ho. Holy crap, Ghostie. Is that a new example instead of the same two over and over? Yes, I'm surprised too. Well, The Shining has an equal parts psychological factor with all the things the Overlook does to fuck with the Torrance family, and the physical threat with the mentally broken Jack Torrance. There's also a very small factor of the Overlook being a cosmic level threat, but it's debatable whether all those things about it being alive, is it being alive, or the story just talking about all the spirits inhabiting its hallways. This example is technically the only one that serves a physical threat to the characters, which is interesting, but sadly it doesn't mean that the liminality is lost after his mental break, and is fully replaced with suspense, which, let's talk more about that now.
So, could it work?
We have finally reached the mother of all crossroads. The main question in your skull today, and the one that's been keeping me up at night for at least the last few months. Would the Backrooms work without Monster? The short answer is kinda. Look, blokes, I gotta be honest, I've been hiding a second definition for liminal horror. We have the first definition that describes what it is, and the second definition. Liminal horror is a tool used in horror media to build tension before a threat is introduced, similar to suspense. You may be thinking, Ghostie, what the fuck are you talking about? And I would like to say, don't cuss at me, I'm a sensitive little boy. And also, there's basically no such thing as only liminal horror. The only exception to this is the original images that sparked the whole thing. Liminality in media that moves like movies and games have an exclusively secondary use. I don't think there is such a thing as a primarily liminal horror based movie. That doesn't make sense for my answer then, because how is it kinda? Well, that's because the very literal version of the question, where I mean just literal monsters, of fucking course the answer is yes. You just have to focus on the psychological side of horror. But we all know that that's just a dumbed down version of the question for click-through rate percentage. What the question really means is, could the Backrooms have grown to the size it has while keeping the mainly liminal feeling? That's the part of the answer where it gets kind of complicated, because after a lot of thinking, the term liminal horror is a little bit misguided. What I mean is that liminality is a very limited and hard to use tool that the other forms of horror hand around like a cock sleeve. Basically, liminality is liminal horror in the same sense that suspense is suspense horror. Yes, there's a way to use it exclusively in liminality, but it's very limited. The same way that there are liminal pictures, there are suspenseful pictures. Hell, if you want a controversial take, when taking account for execution, liminality is just suspense with a dress code. Think about it. In horror, suspense is used as the growing anxiety while going through a place caused by some sort of threat, either suspected or real. From what I've used with liminality in execution, it exists before a threat is introduced and is a subconscious anxiety caused by a twisted version of familiarity. So basically, liminality is suspense, but it only works before a threat is introduced, and the location has to seem familiar but strange to the viewer. Both of those jobs are to build anxiety in the viewer, just through slightly different methods. Anyways, let's see how this Gandhi level wisdom affects different forms of content. Games are basically fucked here, because as soon as you introduce the threat, you are stuck with suspense. This may be a case for being able to build up liminality at the start of each section, but that's an insane amount of work for just some brownie points. Yeah, I think there isn't even a work through for movies through hard work. I'm sorry, movie makers, but you're screwed. The best you're getting is at the beginning. Shows, on the other hand, we know works. Kane Pixels nails it. Start with liminal creepiness, end with suspense. That's the loop. Build, reveal, run. So we know how that works, and we know it works well. Books are probably the second easiest thing to build liminality, because the whole thing about books is that you're the one making visuals in your mind. So you already incorporate the familiariness. but with good enough descriptions, you can be railroaded into making something familiar but off. So could the Backrooms have grown to the side while it did with focusing on liminality? Probably not, no. You don't get games, which are a major factor of the growth through gaming YouTubers playing them. You would still get the reviews of the series and pictures, which would allow it to get pretty far, but just not as far as our Backrooms. So, TLDR? Nah,
I take a look at my enormous penis, and my troubles start melting away.
One thing I could thank him for is this design.
I take a look at my enormous penis, and the happy times are coming to stay.